Hello all, I hope your social distancing has been going well. I know mine has been super productive.
5 themes of geography.
Fresh baked Oreos. Anyways, this got me thinking. Just like how you guys may have learned a new hobby this break, you and your friend might be playing a new video game online, or maybe you and a sibling even created your own game to play at home. The Chinese culture also developed in their own relative isolation. Barriers like the Gobi Desert and the Himalayas stop outside influences from coming in, which is one of the reasons why Chinese language and culture is so much different than our own. The Chinese entered the Neolithic Era at around 7000 BCE when they started farming and domesticated animals like pigs and sheep. Just like all the river valley civilizations that we've learned about, they relied on annual flooding to provide fertile silt and irrigation. And in northern China, along the Yellow River, where it was cooler, they grew crops like wheat and millet. And in southern China, along the Yangtze River, they grew crops like rice. Around 3000 BCE, Chinese culture or civilization took another huge leap, where they started doing things like surrounding their villages with walls and moats. They used pottery wheels to create pottery, and they even started burying people in burial chambers, some of whom were buried with really expensive objects like jade, a hard gemstone. And this shows that they began developing a social hierarchy between rich and poor, different social rankings. Also, it shows they believed in the afterlife because some of the objects that were left in there were things like food that people that are dead wouldn't need, but if you were going to have an afterlife, you might. Other things that were going on was cultural differences developed between northern and southern China because of the Qinling-Shandong mountains kind of separated the two major river systems. And because of this, there is a series of dynasties that were created. Chinese history tends to get lumped into these neat little series of dynasties by historians. And this spans much of Chinese history. It's very similar to the different kingdoms in Egypt, where we had the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. The first dynasty we're going to talk about today is the Shah Dynasty. The Shah Dynasty started in 2200 BCE. Much of what we know about this dynasty comes from studying ancient cities, as well as these ancient stories that got passed down orally over the centuries and were written down much later. In fact, this whole dynasty could be mythical because they couldn't write their stories down. They didn't have a writing system yet. But the most famous ruler of the Shah Dynasty and the guy who founded it, name was Yu the Great. No, not you. You. I'm so cringy. The story goes that Yu's father attempted to control the Yellow River's flooding, but he failed. Yu studied his father's plans along with the help of a semi-mythical master to figure out why they didn't work. Yu then spent 10 years digging canals along with dredging rivers, which is digging the rivers out, to try to control the floods. And he went as far to eat and sleep with the workers and even personally assisted in some of the projects. And Yu's work turned out to be successful, which allowed the region to prosper. Like I said, this may be a mythical dynasty, so historians still debate today whether or not Yu was a real person. The Chinese hadn't developed a writing system during this time period, so his stories weren't written down until much later. He could be entirely made up, or he could be a real person whose feats were just exaggerated. I mean, we still do this today with figures like George Washington and whether he chopped down a cherry tree or had wooden teeth or was able to throw a silver coin across the Potomac River. But even if these stories are fictional, they're still culturally significant to the Chinese. They show how geography can impact people's lives. And also, they're stories of kings who are helping people solve their problems by working together. The first dynasty that we do have good supporting evidence on is the Shang Dynasty, established in 1500 BC. The Shang too had a social hierarchy. The king was the center of religious and political life, and obviously he was also at the top of the pyramid. Next came the nobles and warriors, followed by the artisans, and of course, as always, at the bottom were the farmers and slaves. The Shang may have also used shells and bones as a form of currency. These were used in rituals in which priests would write questions about the future onto them and then heat them up until they cracked. Then the priests believed that they could read the cracks and predict the future. Predicting the future is called an oracle. And in case you missed it, there was another major innovation during the Shang period. They developed a writing system with over 2,000 symbols. And even though there's been a lot of changes to it over the centuries, it's still the basis for the writing system used in China today, roughly 3,000 years later. The Shang Dynasty also had a very robust religion. They had rituals like the oracles and human sacrifice. They worshiped their ancestors. They left offerings for mountains and rivers because they thought that they had certain powers. They created bronze weapons. They invented chariots to wage war. They also invented a calendar to keep track of time. Unfortunately, all dynasties must come to an end, be it the Chicago Bulls, the New England Patriots, or the Shang. An emerging dynasty to the west, called the Zhou, defeated the Shang in about 1000 BCE and took over their territory. Geography greatly impacted all early civilizations, and China is no means an exception. The Yellow and Yangtze rivers allowed civilizations to develop along their banks. Geographical features like mountains, deserts, seas, and even just sheer distance helped protect Chinese culture from outside influences and invaders. Scientific advancements, writing systems, and social orders developed in locksteps. Ideas of religion and common themes of humanity, like helping those in need, developed as well, helping to create a foundation for future Chinese dynasties to build upon. Anyways, I hope you guys are all doing well. I miss you all terribly, and let me know what you're doing for quarantine.